Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Scuba Science. Scuba diving relies heavily on functional scuba diving equipment. So in today's episode we will discuss how scuba diving regulators actually work. A scuba regulator is one of the most essential pieces of scuba equipment as it allows air to come from the scuba cylinder to the scuba diver in a breathable way. Despite their small size and seemingly simple design, scuba regulators are the result of true ingenuity and engineering. So in this episode of Scuba Science, we will discuss how scuba regulators actually work and how they are able to deliver breathable air to scuba divers. This program is self-funded, so if you want to support the Dive Saga channel, you can always pick up some Dive Saga merch from our website. I will put a link below. You can also pick up my book Career in Scuba, and of course you can simply like the video, comment and subscribe to the Dive Saga channel. At its core, a scuba regulator performs one simple function: to reduce the pressure of air in a scuba cylinder to a breathable pressure for scuba divers. This happens in two stages. The first stage reduces the high pressure of the gas that is stored in a cylinder to what's called an intermediate pressure. From this intermediate pressure, a second stage reduces this gas to what is called ambient pressure, the pressure the diver is under at the depth they are at, which makes this gas breathable. The first stage of a scuba regulator is the part that is connected directly to the scuba cylinder. It is called the first stage because this is quite literally the first stage of regulating the air pressure from high scuba cylinder pressure, often 200 to 300 bar, 3000 psi, to an intermediate pressure. This intermediate pressure depends a bit on the manufacturer, often situated around 8 to 10 bar, maybe around 150 psi. This is essential because without a first stage, the high pressure gas in the cylinders would obviously overwhelm the lungs of the diver if aspired. The first stage achieves this reduction in pressure by using essentially a valve system that opens and closes with the diver's demand. For this, there are essentially two types of designs: diaphragm regulators and piston regulators. Piston regulators use a piston to control the airflow. When the diver inhales, the piston moves and allows airflow into the first stage intermediate pressure chamber. Piston first stages are known for their simplicity, reliability, and ability to allow for high workload. Diaphragm regulators, on the other hand, rely on a flexible diaphragm to control the flow of gas. When the diver inhales, the diaphragm moves, allowing airflow into the intermediate pressure chamber. Diaphragm regulators are often preferred for cold water diving, such as ice diving, because they are less likely to freeze up. So depending on the type of diving that you will be doing, you may prefer a piston regulator or a diaphragm regulator. It's very important to premeditate this decision. As discussed in previous episodes, as the diver descends, the amount of pressure increases. At a depth of 10 meters, 33 feet, we are already experiencing twice the pressure we experience at the surface. This also means that our consumption doubles. This change in pressure and the change in demand from the diver of course affects the function of the regulator. And for that reason, there are two types of scuba first stages. There are balanced regulators and unbalanced regulators. Most modern regulators will be balanced first stages. A balanced first stage adapts towards the surrounding pressure regardless of the content of the cylinder. It doesn't matter how much air is left in the scuba cylinder, a balanced regulator will deliver the same consistent amount of gas. This is obviously especially important when the diver dives deeper or when the scuba cylinder is nearly empty. An unbalanced regulator, on the other hand, does become much harder to breathe from as the diver dives deeper or when the tank pressure runs low. They are much simpler in design and less expensive to produce, but balanced regulators obviously offer superior comfort and performance. On the first stage, we also find different types of ports, namely high pressure ports and low pressure ports. These have different thread sizes and are usually clearly indicated on the specific ports. High pressure ports are used to connect submersible pressure gauges or transmitters because they need to monitor the exact air pressure inside the cylinder. Low pressure ports can be used for a variety of different applications, such as our BCD inflator hose, our second stage of our regulator, and our dry suit inflator hose. The second stage of the regulator is the part of the regulator that the scuba diver puts in their mouth. The primary function of this stage of the regulator is to reduce the air pressure from intermediate pressure, 8 to 10 bar around 150 psi, to ambient pressure, whatever the pressure is at that depth at that moment. This ensures that divers can breathe naturally regardless of the depth. The second stage contains a demand valve. This valve opens when the diver inhales or demands air and closes when the diver exhales. This is essential because without such a demand valve, a continuous stream of gas would be impractical and, of course, wasteful. When the diver exhales and this demand valve closes, of course, the exhaled gas is vented via the sides into the water. Key components of most second stage regulators include a diaphragm. The diaphragm sits in front of our mouth and flexes towards us as we inhale. It is this flexing of the diaphragm that typically pushes on the demand lever, allowing for airflow from the first stage. That means that besides a diaphragm, there needs to be a demand lever, the part that moves open and closed as we demand for air. Second stages also need exhaust valves because when we exhale, the diaphragm flexes outwards, the demand lever closes, exhaled air needs to be vented into the water through these exhaust ports. And because of this design, most regulators will have a purge valve on the housing. This purge valve depresses directly onto the diaphragm and the lever to manually purge air into the regulator and to clear it of any water. Most modern second stages are designed to be compact, lightweight and performant, but there are different types depending on what you need from a scuba regulator. Some more modern regulators might have an adjustment that allows you to regulate the ease of breathing effort, and there are slight variations in design, so do make sure to do your research before you commit to purchasing a certain type of second stage. In cold water diving, regulators obviously run the risk of freezing. When gas is decompressed from high pressure to lower pressure, the gas gets colder. If the surrounding water is cold enough, then the rapidly decreasing temperature in the first stage plus the cold water can cause the first stage to freeze up. This ice formation can, of course, block the airflow. To mitigate this, cold water regulators often include an environmental seal and heat exchangers to prevent freezing. Once again, it is important to inform yourself and decide which type of diving you are likely to be doing when you plan to purchase a regulator. Modern scuba regulators come with a variety of engineering and extra features to enhance the diver's comfort and the device's performance. Adjustable second stages, as mentioned earlier, allow divers to fine-tune the amount of effort that is required when breathing. A Venturi assist helps direct the airflow to reduce breathing resistance. And of course, an alternate air source second stage or octopus provides air to a second diver breathing from the same first stage. Some regulators may have swivel connections which can be added if the diver prefers, which of course helps with angling the second stage and makes diving more comfortable, maybe even reduces jaw fatigue. And as mentioned earlier, environmental seals and other design features may be more preferable for divers who want to dive in cold water or more extreme conditions. Of course, all these features will have an influence on the price tag and on how easy it is to have a regulator serviced. Factor all of these things into your plan when purchasing a regulator. Regulator maintenance is crucial if you want to keep your SCUBA regulator functioning reliably and safely. After each dive, it should be obvious that a regulator needs to be rinsed thoroughly in fresh water. And it is important to avoid pressing the purge button on the second stage, as this may lodge water into the first stage. Regardless of how well you rinse and store your equipment after every dive, an annual servicing is required for SCUBA regulators. While you may not do this for your BCD and let's say your mask or fins, your SCUBA regulator needs to be inspected and serviced annually. During this process, worn parts will be replaced and the interior of the regulator will be thoroughly cleaned. Every regulator manufacturer will have a specific licensed servicing network, so make sure to seek out a licensed service technician for your SCUBA regulator brand. It is absolutely not recommended that you try to service your own regulator without proper training. And training is manufacturer and sometimes even type specific. In conclusion, SCUBA regulators are sophisticated devices that seem very simple, but actually go a long way in making a dive safe and help humans breathe underwater. By reducing air pressure from high pressure in the cylinder to intermediate pressure and eventually to ambient pressure, they allow us to breathe comfortably for extended periods of time, regardless of the diving conditions around us. Of course, you should not use this video to perform any kind of maintenance on your own equipment. You should always seek out a licensed technician, and even if you use this video to inform your purchase, talk to your dealer. Make sure that whatever type of regulator you purchase is fit for the type of diving you plan to do. There are many different SCUBA regulators out there and many may be suitable for your environment, but each one of them has their own little specific functionalities. That's the result of over 70 years of SCUBA science.